negative gearing is not a strategy. Okay, it's not a strategy. It's a moment in time, or it's a benefit of buying a property. It just makes up part of the outcome of the type of asset that you buy. And when I said moment in time, yeah, sure, it might be negatively geared for the first 5 years, 10 years, but as the rents continue to increase and as you potentially pay down debt, let's assume you're paying down debt, you may not be, but you may be, there's going to be a crossover and a point in time, which then that property then becomes positively geared, meaning that it obviously gives you an income outside of all expenses.
Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Lise.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Excited to be here in the studio.
Absolute pleasure. It's not my studio, but it's a nice studio. So today, what are we talking about, Lisa?
We are talking about property investing and all the strategies that go along with it. It obviously connects really nicely into our strategic chess brief or description, which is about, creating wealth and making sure people are aware of all the different levers that you can pull in order to build that wealth in the short term and the long term. So we're both very passionate about property as a whole, and obviously you're the guy in terms of the financials, and Matt's the guy in terms of finding the right properties and the land and knowing where the locations are and all those types of things. So that's what we're going to delve into today and give everyone a crash course on the topic of property investment.
Well said, Lise. So something you just said that I agree on is financial planning or financial advice or accountants can give good financial advice, but where that usually gets diluted is not getting good property advice, and that's what Maddie does very well and does with a lot of our clientele, which we're very fortunate to have happen. So yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly, is having an integration between good financial advice, good financial chess playing, also that comes from good business chess playing, and then being able to make sure that we're playing chess with our property selection is really, really important. Lisa and I actually had a client not so long ago, and this is probably a weekly thing that occurs right now, where that chess playing is so important, Maddie, in terms of the finance structuring, in terms of the location and making sure we can capitalize on that. And then also in terms of the tax gearing as well. So we're playing that game. So ultimately, we have this really good holistic property wealth vehicle moving forward. So I'm keen, if you guys are keen, to tap into like the different elements, whether it's the tax benefits, whether it's the property selection benefits, and just how to make sure we've got a really well geared property portfolio that we can leverage off year on year.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll just touch on that as well. Look, I think it's critical that if you're going to invest in property and succeed in investing in properties, you need to have these roundtable discussions with your financial planner, with your accountant, with your mortgage broker, and with your property advisor, so that we're all on the same page and we're all heading to that right direction. So one thing that a lot of people actually don't understand is there are boundaries around what you can advise depending on which hat you wear, okay? So a financial planner, for example, isn't able to give property advice. A mortgage broker isn't allowed to give property advice and can't give financial advice. An accountant can't give financial advice. So it's about having everyone, and certainly myself as a property advisor, I can't give financial advice. It's not my space to ask someone what their income is, what their discretionary spending looks like, all of this sort, I don't have that knowledge. So that's when I feel like everyone needs to sit at that round table. And I know this is why we work so well together. Everyone play your role in terms of your advisory role and your expertise, and guide the client or the individual to the best possible outcome that is based around their circumstances and where they're at with life and their spending habits and their income and all those types of things. And then that gives us better direction to say, hey, this location is going to suit you better. This price point of property is going to suit you better based on everything that we discussed during our group session, or based on the advice that the financial planner's given us, the accountant, the mortgage broker, and whatnot.
I think it's equally as important to educate all clientele moving forward about how important it is to have those respective opinions sitting at a board, all with an aligned view, because what I find is that clients don't know a lot of this. They'll go to a broker because they need money, and then they'll go and handpick a property themselves because they think it was the right thing to do, and then that leads to disaster. In whether you're an investor or you're a property developer or whatever you're doing, that wrong assumption, because buyers agents and property advisors haven't been around for all that long, that wrong assumption ends them with incorrect wealth. But if we can educate the clientele more that you need to have a round table, and your round table or mastermind of advisors needs to be broker, buyer's agent or property advisor and financial planner accountant, then you're able to get a maximised outcome, a maximised ROI.
And that's the key, just maximising your outcome, right?
But also minimising all the admin time and the confusion and the runaround, right? Like, if coming from experience, like when you've got to sit there and we start to delve into self-managed super funds and buying property through super fund and things like that, the amount of work you've got to do if you're going to an accountant or a financial planner first, then an accountant, then you're going to your buyer's agent, then you're going to your broker, and then you're going back around again. It's just so much time and effort, and then you're not maximising the value that you're getting out of it either, right? So...
Exactly. And look, if you're an accountant or a broker out there or financial planner and you work and one of your clients is working with a property advisor or buyer's agent, just request to jump on those calls. Like, we've got an open door policy where we are. It's just, I would welcome those other professionals in on all of our discussions. One, so that they can understand where we're coming from and the perspective that we're coming from. And also, I guess if there's something that we've missed in terms of income or life event that might be coming up, or maybe some other investments that they have coming, or maybe an inheritance coming, we can be privy to that and they can kind of give us that knowledge as well. Again, it's just about getting a better outcome for the client.
And that's exactly why we're trying to, or why we are setting up the model that we've set up. And obviously we're really lucky to have great relationships with people like yourself and Aaron, who's a broker, our go-to broker, and obviously Ryan is the financial planner and a team of accountants, because our part of our offer is that we can provide almost like that one-stop shop for people. But they're also welcome to bring in their other people that they trust as well if they prefer that. So we're seeing that really nice integration now. We're saying this is an amazing offer to people because you can come to us, we can give you the advice, we can take you through the process, we can hold your hand along the way, but we can make sure you've got trusted people in your corner. Because it's really hard to just go out and find a buyer's agent that you trust or a broker that you trust without having a recommendation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I came from a client today, amazing client, and they just want that trusted advisory board. And the more I could laser in on, if you have the different elements of that advisory board, then you're going to get the best of all worlds, because you might be able to select the perfect location, Maddie, but you don't really know that much when it comes to like in-depth structuring for a client, which you're not expected, which you're not expected to know, right?
No, it's
and a broker isn't expected to have the directive of that same tax deductibility as well. So we all have benefits, but the real benefit is when they integrate.
Yes.
100%.
Like, I can't find a location. Like, and I said that to that exact client. I could go and handpick a location with you right now, and it could be in the completely the wrong region.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity cost is gone. So I think,
But we build our knowledge too, which is great.
I think
build our knowledge when we're doing these discussions together, right?
Absolutely, which is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I think, think of it like if you're a professional athlete or you're an Olympic athlete, you've got your nutritionist, you've got your strength and conditioning coach. These days, you've got your mindset coach.
Yeah.
You've got everything. You've got your strength coach. You've got all of these different people in your corner to maximize your result. And it's basically the same thing, right? It's almost exactly the same thing. So, it's exciting, and obviously, we get to learn, and you get to have a bit of an insight into the clients that we help and the outcomes that we get, and it's the exact same with us.
Yeah. Let's delve into it. The benefits, the strategies.
I think benefits would be, before we tap into strategies, the benefits of doing this, from my lens, mate, and Lisa, my benefit, so the benefit would be if you get a good location, like a really good location, and you get that location negotiated correctly, that contributes to an ROI. If you have your loan or your finance structured correctly, it means you can create a more leveraged position, but it also means you get more money back in tax effectively, which then leads to more the financial planning side of things, which is more tax back, more tax deductibility of money, a lower principal place of residence loan, and the list goes on. So I think the real benefit is the culmination of little 1% ROIs because you're leveling up on all three areas. So I think key benefit for me is more ROI out of your investment, faster leverage of that ROI, or what people call as equity. And then when you fast forward 2, 3, 5 or 10 years time, you have exponential more wealth because you ticked off on those three core areas simultaneously as you continue to roll.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. Unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet out there in terms of wealth creation, especially in property. If there is, I haven't found one yet, and I've allocated and dedicated a lot of time to finding good deals. And it's about those 1%, I guess, increments and improvements across a bunch of different areas, which are really going to give you that major ROI at the end.
I feel like, though, finding the right location is so incredibly important. Yeah, like thinking about, we're going to talk about leveraging, and what you just said is so probably the biggest benefit, I think, which is being able to create equity and keep building your portfolio, right? But I feel like from experience, you know, seeing the growth that you can get in 1 or 2 years, even in some locations, is amazing. Like 1, 2, 300K even. Like where have you seen it? Like what?
So yeah, location's key. Like, you know, as the saying goes, location. But you know, you got macro kind of locations. So how do you identify regions or cities or even states to invest in, and why, and what are the key drivers behind that? And then as you dive in deeper and kind of look at that micro level, you're thinking, okay, well, all right, I've now ticked the macro in terms of the region. Now, which suburbs within those regions are going to outperform and why? And then you're diving into the suburb, and then you're saying, okay, now within that suburb, which streets are performing better and why? Now, that could be because of school catchment. It could be because of street frontage. It could be because it's quiet. It could be because it has ocean views. It could be because it backs onto rural land or large acreages. Who knows? But the location is just like, you know, it's a big can of worms, but you absolutely need to get it right. And history shows it does about 80% of the heavy lifting. Right. So you're better off to have an average house in a good location than a good house in an average location every single time.
Yep. And like, I think there's a lot of rhetoric out there at the moment about where the locations are at the moment. And you just said something so important about, you know, the macro versus, you know, that smaller level. We're hearing things like Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, that's where it's at, close to mining, where the Olympics are. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Or are you looking regional, or you're just looking really at what the buyers want and then honing in on that? Yeah,
good question. So it's something that we're always assessing. So we have eyes across the whole Australian market, right? But realistically, we're probably only buying in probably a dozen markets. And look, I guess we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in any way, but we're always looking at kind of like 5 key pillars. So we're looking at economic factors, so things like job growth, economic diversity, growing economies. We're looking at amenities and infrastructure. So obviously you need amenities within an area, so things like education, you know, universities, schools, of course, you know, medical facilities, so, you know, established hospitals, new hospitals, these types of things. Then we're looking at infrastructure, so what's there in the way of public transport, you know, maybe new highways, these types of things. But also what falls under the infrastructure banner would be, you know, new projects coming as well. So are there new universities being built? Are there new shopping precincts being built? Are there new medical facilities or hospitals being built? So those kinds of things are key. And then we're looking at the property market itself, so the buying and selling trends, seeing what's happening there, and are they trending up, are they trending down, what's the supply-demand ratio look like? And then we're looking at the rental market itself, so we're doing a deep analysis on, okay, is the rental market, is it strong, is it weak, are there enough rentals for people, what's the vacancy rate like, these types of things. And also, where does it sit? Something that we're really focusing on at the moment is, where does it sit from an affordability standpoint? Okay, we're starting to see, obviously, a lot of homes under stress now in the way of, you know, spending and the cost of living going up. So let's just say a rental property of $800 per week, 12 months ago might have been fine for a lot of families, but now that 800 is actually more like a $650 or $700. So we're really having a really close look at those rental markets. And then kind of our last kind of focus area is livability and likability. So, and it's a hard one to measure, but basically we want to buy in areas where people actually want to be there. Like despite everything that I just mentioned, we want to buy in locations that people want to reside. They want to be close to the water. They want to be in that school catchment. They like the feel of the community. So that's kind of what we put under the livability and likability. And the reason why we put a high importance on that is because ultimately property is an emotional purchase, right? People like us that are investing are looking at our numbers and we're buying calculated. The mum and dad that absolutely need to be in that street because it's in that school catchment, because it has the tree line, because it, you know, the Johnsons live down the road, they don't give a shit about the price. They're maxing out their budget, right? So we want to strategically buy in these types of areas. So we're buying in these areas where people want to be, the new gentrification areas that are gentrifying, areas that are affluent, these types of pockets of, you know, of Australia, I guess. And for us, you know, we have certain metrics around, metrics around how we can kind of identify those areas. So we're looking at ensuring that the household ownership kind of makes up at least 2/3 of the percentage of owners. So what I mean by that is, you know, a minimum of sort of 66% of people either own their home or are paying a mortgage in that area, and then less than sort of 33% are renting. So why that's important is because homeowners are more likely to be house proud, right? They're more likely to do improvements and renovating to the property. They're more likely to do maintenance as well, which ultimately means that that's adding more value to the suburb, to that street, which is going to drag the price up, make it more attractive and obviously more desirable for people to spend more in the area. A lot of people get it wrong and they get told or spooked that, oh, this is a great investment. Okay, why is it a good investment? Oh, because it's low maintenance and it's new and it's whatever. But what they're not being told, and the research and the data that they're not looking at, is that, you know, that sales agent or whoever's advising them to buy that property is saying that same narrative to everyone, meaning that there's a major imbalance in the amount of investors or renters in that market, and there's not enough owner occupiers in that area. So therefore there's going to be a slow incline in prices, right? Because there's no one there that actually wants to be there. There's no one there improving their houses, because, you know, a lot of the time investors don't want to spend much on their investments.
Correct. Wow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you need a good buyer's agent, because there's a lot involved there. But that is all exactly spot on from my experience. So I couldn't have. Yeah, that's amazing. How do you keep up with all that?
I guess no sleep and years of I guess doing this, you know, personally and professionally. But we're lucky that we have a really good and experienced team behind us, which both of you are well aware of. But I think, I guess, you know, it's what we do. Like you could sit there and probably talk about key things in finance and accounting, and, you know, my eyes would probably be spinning as well, but probably just circles back to the importance where it's like, okay, well, this is my domain. Let me kind of take the reins here. And then when I need to pass it on to someone like yourselves, I'll let you do your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to go a little bit deeper on how you kind of get in and ascertain what are the good macro regions as much as the micro streets, etc. What are you using? Are you using like reporting? Is that how you're being able to dig in and find opportunities?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So we probably use around half a dozen of, I guess, reliable property subscriptions and data, and all of those are paid. If anyone's out there and they want access to free data, ABS is always really helpful, not realestate.com, abs.gov, I think .au. And the reason why that's important is because it gives you statistics around what's happening with different demographics. Okay, is the population growing? What's the median household income? These types of things. And also you'll have access to some property data in there in the way of whether or not certain suburbs are outperforming state averages and those types of things. But to answer your question, we probably have about half a dozen, I guess, platforms that we will always reference back to. And unfortunately, they're not overly consistent. They're quite inconsistent depending on how you pull the data. But it's about just, I guess, working through that and grabbing certain snippets from each and every part. But the key one for us, and I think just like a really, really basic one, is, you know, we're looking at, economies, like what's happening in the economy.
So
like the
important.
economy is the backbone of any property market. Like it's as simple as that. So where is their government and private spending? Like where is that being injected into certain areas? And then is that creating jobs now? And is that going to, what's the longevity and what's the sustainability of those jobs within an area? So you mentioned whether or not there were certain areas in certain mining areas that are doing well at the moment. Like, yeah, they are, especially in parts of Perth. But they're heavily reliant on one industry. The moment that industry has some sort of an impact, positive, negative, or indifferent, the housing market is directly impacted. So for us, we typically won't buy in those areas, not unless our clients have really strong foundations set up in their portfolio. So I'm talking minimum of kind of 3 or 4 high quality assets before we start to speculate in these other markets, because then, obviously if the market's going up or down there, it's not a major hit to your portfolio. So the areas that we like to buy in typically have really diverse economies for that reason, for that long sustainability and stable growth.
Yeah. And you're right, obviously, because when we talk about property development, for instance, when we're talking that, we're talking short term, quick flip, make money. Investments are more long-term wealth creation, portfolio growth, right? So that is so important long term, not just, going with what's, the hot area for the moment.
Yeah. And I guess with the development stuff, the location is equally as critical.
Well, that's right.
It put simply, it costs you the same amount to put a kitchen in a house in one suburb as it does the other. The construction costs don't change, right? What changes is the location, right? You can leverage the hell out of a block of dirt, which is key. And just like you can leverage a suburb and a region, but when you're doing the developments, you need to really, really nail that location. And I see it so often that people get it wrong. And a couple of things that you want to look at is obviously the amount of sun, the aspect, the views, the scarcity of the block, what can be done on the block. These types of things are critical if you're looking at doing a development. How appealing is it to the market? What comparables are around?
Especially because of time. Like with long-term investment, you've got a bit of time that you can play and ride a little bit of the ups and downs and hold that long-term view. Whereas with development and the amount of holding cost there, you've got a window. You've got like a sales window, and so you can't hold for very long. So again, I think universally, you got to nail location. Whether you're a first home buyer that's going in, and I just got off a call with a first home buyer, I said same thing. This is critical. Whether it's a more informal conversation with you or a more formal engagement with you, I said if you can buy that location, and you nail the street or you nail whatever it is. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if it is a lower valued first principal place of residence. But then, or if it goes to the other end of the spectrum as developing, it's even more important. So I just think, like Lisa mentioned before, leverage is important, but how you start is what you can then leverage. And then if you do it again based on these principles, you can leverage faster. So,
well, the quicker you get growth in your investment property, the quicker you can leverage and grow your portfolio too. So it's not necessarily just long term.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And it's easy to fix the property. It's not easy to fix the location.
Exactly.
It's very, very expensive to fix the location because you're going to have agent fees. You're potentially going to have capital gains tax. If it's owner occupier, obviously you won't, but if it's an investment, you will. And then also you're going to have stamp duty when you go to buy again. So depending on the purchase price in which you're selling and buying, we could be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Big mistake.
And I think I go back to when I first started buying property. Like I didn't even know what a buyer's agent or a property advisor was. I just went, you buy a property. And then I look back in hindsight, knowing what I know now, and I was like, imagine if I had got a buyer's agent or a property advisor to help me with that, I would have realised equity or capital a lot more quicker, and then being able to piggyback off that to then go again, utilising same principles. So
I got very lucky. I had somebody great in my corners, so like I was sort of given it on a platter, but I could see then the benefits of getting it done right. So I take my hat off to buyer's agents because of how much they help you build that wealth.
Yeah. Or you could do what I did. I spent 4 years just trying to work out where the perfect
Yeah, no
house
thanks.
was.
We'll just let you do that work. You can do the work.
From about 20, I think I was ready to buy my first place. And I didn't pull the trigger until I was 24.
Imagine all the properties you could have bought.
Oh, it's just going around in circles. But yeah, still own that one now today, and yeah, obviously very happy in it.
Yeah, good.
So nail the location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next?
Leverage. Talk about leverage. I think that's important to talk about because you've got obviously tons of experience in this area and how people do misunderstand what they've got available to them. Like there's a lot of people out there right now who could be able to become investors or developers. They just don't realise they've got equity, and they also think it's all about cash, deposits, things like that. So maybe just delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think being a financial advisor for a long time, and I think you build an appetite for leverage, or you build an appetite for finance, or you build an appetite for debt. Most people don't build that appetite, and some it takes a maturing of years to build that appetite. I'm not saying go out and be like Donald Trump by any means and just finance everything till the cows come home. But good debt is good debt for a reason, okay? Good debt, bad debt. Bad debt, credit cards, good debt, finance for property, okay? The reason it's good debt is because property goes up, property appreciates. If you nail the location, the property value will go up. And ideally, the rate your property increases in terms of rental yield in combination with capital growth, that would outweigh the interest cost. That's a geared position, right? Now, if you just always use your cash to buy a property, it would be a slower route. But if you can leverage finance that costs 5% but grows at 10%, that 5% is a geared position, which is leverage, okay? So if you bought a crappy location or a crappy property in a crappy street or whatever else that we mentioned before, you don't have a potential leverage position. You potentially have a disaster, which means your finance cost or interest cost could potentially outweigh your return, your capital growth plus your rental yield. So I think nailing the location first and then having a mindset that builds over time where you can use finance to then build that return. And then that return, if it builds fast enough, what it will do is it will create equity. And long story short, equity is the difference between the loan and the value of the property and what the value of the property is now. Creates an equitable position. And you're allowed to use that equitable position in lieu of cash, okay, to then buy another property. That's simply how leverage works. And again, nailing location creates that value quicker, which means you can use that equity or cash quicker to buy the next property, nail the location again, create a greater leverage position. Before you know it, 5-10 years passes, your wealth position is massive, right? It is huge and it is life-changing. And unfortunately, and I want to bring this point right home, most people aren't aware of this. Most people aren't educated on this like location. And so what happens is they get to 30, 40, 50, 60, the years tick over. Their mind has always been pay down the family home. And they could have had a 5x their wealth position had they adopted principles of location analysis, of leverage analysis to be able to then catapult themselves ahead. So that's kind of concept of leverage in my eyes. Matty Lease, I don't know if you've got something that you want to add to that.
Yeah, it's really, for me, it was when the light bulb moment happened a few years ago, was the power of leverage. So the way I look at it is basically cash on cash return. So if we kind of exclude all additional costs and just keep it really simple, but let's just say we've got 50,000 cash sitting in our bank account and we want to invest it. Essentially, you've got two options. You can either go and put it in a share market or you can buy property, right? That's excluding business and whatnot. So let's just keep it simple. So if I've got 50,000, you can essentially go and buy a $500,000 property. And again, I'm going to exclude all buying costs just to keep it simple. So your 50 grand is in for a $500,000 property. Now, you're probably carrying around $450,000 worth of debt. If that property goes up in value, let's just say 5%, 7% annually, within that first year, you've nearly made your cash back.
Correct.
You know, let's just say it goes up by 5%, which is very conservative. In 2 years, you've essentially made your money back.
Versus the
other, where you're going to go into a share market, and let's just say that's going up 5% per annum, compounding growth, you won't have your cash back in kind of 2 years. So for me, that was a major kind of light bulb moment where I thought, okay, this is why people are, this is why the smart people are buying and investing in property.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was more like, obviously the leveraging part of it was a bit of like, wow, this is quite amazing that I can do all this and not have to have, because I like a lifestyle, right? I like to spend money on things like Gucci bags and go out on the weekends and things like that. And I've obviously got 2 kids. I shouldn't forget about them. So I need cash. So I was always worried about doing it and thinking, now I'm going to have to pay out, the loans and all these fees, put my bag down.
Spend this on property.
Don't touch it. Andrew just put it on the ground.
This isn't leverage. That thing's depreciated.
I sold a house to get that one.
Which was appreciated 20%.
No, look, for me, it was all about cash, right? So I was thinking, oh, goodness, how am I going to do this? But I didn't realise that I don't have to actually outlay cash. I could use the equity in other property like my own occupied residence. Now, then I go and use the other investment property, another investment property, and it continues to go from there. But the next benefits that come from it, which I'd love you to go into a bit deeper, are then like the negative gearing and depreciation, which is like fake in my mind. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, houses, properties appreciate, yet you can claim depreciation and get that in your negative gearing. So I think that's an important topic. But also, if you get the yield right, you're not outlaying any cash because your rent pays for your loans and all your other rates and things like that. So you're not actually missing any cash if you get the right property. So for me, that was like the light bulb moment where I was like, I don't actually have to outlay. There's one that I have to outlay more cash on now, but it's okay because the other properties help prop that up. But initially, there was no downfall. And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, and it's the same as me. And you can manipulate your portfolio depending on your circumstances.
Exactly.
Like if you need to ramp up the cash flow, you buy the right property to assist with that. If cash flow is not important to you, you buy another property that is more likely to have some capital growth. Exactly. So that's why it circles back again to the importance of everyone sitting at a round table and saying, what's going to suit you best based on what you have coming up? Not, I've got an investment property, this is going to suit the next 10 people that walk through our door.
Exactly. Because some people might not care about the cash element. They might be wanting the growth.
Exactly.
And that's a very good strategy too.
Yep, exactly.
And I might just get your take on this, Maddie, as well, with what Lisa mentioned about negative gearing, because that's a huge advantage for us. Yep. And I know your mindset on it, so I'm keen to find a united front on the depreciation conversation. For a long time, I was very for newer properties, okay, from buyers agents, property advisors. Reason being is if it's a new build, okay, and it's constructed and it's $300,000 to construct it, like Lisa mentioned, it's kind of just built into the cost of the property. You don't wear it in terms of cash. So you can be positively geared, meaning this is the income I make on an investment property, less all my cash expenses. I'm positively geared from a cash flow, okay? But you can be negatively geared from a tax standpoint, meaning here's my income, here's my expenses, but here's the depreciation, like the 300K building that I write off over 40 years, which is a large chunk of money, but you don't even have to pay for that depreciation. It's just an entitlement because you bought the building, and it was a newer building, which means I'm in negative now. And then I use that to get a better tax return. Okay, so that's like cash gearing versus negative gearing. We've had conversations in the past, and I know you're very big on not new build for depreciation, but big on location, 80% of the heavy lifting, which you mentioned before. Is there a way to find the best of both worlds? Because negative gearing is very, very beneficial from a cash flow standpoint, using that negative gearing strategy. We also want to nail location. So is there a way to get a win-win?
All right. It's a good question. So I guess my view on it might be a little bit controversial, especially sitting with a couple of accountants.
I'm not an accountant.
You got to keep it fun, right?
All right. So,
and I agree. Firstly, I want to just say I agree on location. I just want to make sure.
I'll try and steer it away from location. All right. So negative gearing is not a strategy. Okay. It's not a strategy. It's a moment in time, or it's a benefit of buying a property. Okay, that's it. It's not a strategy. It just makes up part of the outcome of the type of asset that you buy. All right. So with that being said, and when I said moment in time, yeah, sure, it might be negatively geared for the first 5 years, 10 years, but as the rents continue to increase and as you potentially pay down debt, let's assume you're paying down debt, you may not be, but you may be, there's going to be a crossover and a point in time, which then that property then becomes positively geared, meaning that it obviously gives you an income outside of all expenses. So that's the first thing. I will say, in terms of it being a benefit, depending on your income, obviously it can be a major benefit, but it can also be a major hindrance and a reason why people can't hold the property, right? So again, that's why we all need to be sitting on the same table, why you need to be really in tune with your account or financial planner to map out what this is going to look like, okay? But it's not a strategy, it's just it's basically just a benefit or a feature of having a property. The other thing is depreciation. Now, the reason why the government implemented the depreciation benefits is to stimulate new builds and stimulate investors to buy new buildings, okay? Now, who gives a shit if you're getting 10 grand a year for depreciation when your property's not going up in value? You could have a $750,000 property that doesn't go up in value, but you're getting 10 grand a year depreciation. Who gives a fuck about that? Not me. I'd rather buy a
I love how passionate you are. See, I'm not allowed to swear, but I get passionate. But I love how G'd up you are. So keep going, baby. Bring it home.
No, but I'm just saying because there are a lot of advisors out there and accountants, which you and I know, and
not me, not
you.
That's
but
why
I mean,
I use you, right?
I mean others out there that say, "Oh, this is great. You got depreciation. You're getting 10 grand for the next 10 years.
But your
100
property's
grand.
crap.
Great." $700,000 property. So what? It's going to be It's going to be worth roughly $800,000 to me in 10 years. Are you serious? Should be 1.5. So anyway,
and that's an important point. So conversation last week, we said we were in a meeting together. We said to a client, we said it's important. Tax benefits, not strategy benefit. We'll go benefit. Better word. Tax benefits are secondary to the core principle and focus, which is location.
Yeah, mate, couldn't have said it better. Now
I have, and I'm passionate too.
Mate, don't get me wrong, right? I personally got a depreciation schedule done on a commercial space that we own just I'd say about a month ago, and I was like, oh, awesome. Like I was pumped about getting that little win, right? But I've already ticked all the big boxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
So just an extra.
It's an extra.
Yeah.
But it's a good extra.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, even to your point before, they don't even know about getting a depreciation schedule. Every single one of our clients get connected to a quantity surveyor who will do a desktop assessment with the property to find out whether or not it's eligible or not for them to go and do a on-site inspection to then carry out the depreciation schedule. Now, depending on the age of the building and their fixtures and fittings and whatnot, they will make that assessment and then they'll go out there and then obviously carry out the assessment as to whether or not there's depreciation on the property. And if there is, great, but as long as you've already ticked all those boxes, don't go the other way around.
Yeah, and just to be clear again, depreciation is writing off buildings, right, of an investment property, for example, or it's writing off depreciable assets like this that would be in an investment over time.
Yeah, and as a simple rule, just think the newer the building, the more depreciation you'll get. The older the building, less likely.
Yeah. And look, the only other thing with a new building is obviously you're unlikely to have to pay for those costs, maintenance costs, the stove's broken or there's, a problem with the roof or whatever it is that you normally have to pay for. But I mean, where do you sit in terms of buying? And I guess it probably comes back to what the person needs, but in terms of buying a new build versus a house that's 20 years old.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We literally had a meeting with someone today about that. It just depends on your own position, your own skill set, your risk appetite, what other properties you already hold. So I'm kind of, I guess for me, we might be going a little bit deep here, but the ultimate portfolio for me is a combination of different types of assets in different types of locations that all offer something different, right? So let's assume you've got the old, you've got the real old cottage that's in a prime location that's fallen apart, that's been there for 100 years. Then you've got a couple of other kind of medium style average homes that aren't brand new but aren't old, that are fine. And then you've got, something that's a little bit newer that's kind of ticking off that depreciation. So you're getting a bit of everything across your whole portfolio. And
diversifying risk.
and you're diversifying your risk, and
Yeah.
you're diversifying your options as the time goes down as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you own all of those properties in your personal name, you're still getting some depreciation benefits off property one, but you're not really getting many off the other two or three. So for us, it's about obviously building that out. But in terms of, to answer your question, it comes down to the individual. We'll work with builders that will absolutely want something that they can fix up and add some of their own value, so a bit of sweat equity, which we're all very familiar with. And then we'll have other people that are quite scared, or not scared, but they have a really low risk appetite for any kind of maintenance and whatnot, and they kind of just need the newer, shinier home, which I'm okay with, but it's not brand new. It's usually around 3 to 5 years old, because that's typically when you start to see. So it usually takes around 3 to 5 years for the suburb and the area to start to pick up the value as to where a brand new build would be. So usually if you're buying something brand new, you're probably not going to see a lot of growth for the first 3 to 5 years. That's in an area that's, let's just call it 200 housing land packages, or a whole bunch of new townhouses. Single developments are totally different. We're not talking about that.
I want to talk about, because we're in this realm of negative gearing, I want to talk about interest on loans. That's a really important benefit as well, right? Yes. A lot of families will not be mindful of the higher debt on investment properties, okay? Back to the negative gearing again, we're talking about with the depreciation. If you have higher loans on your investment properties, you create more of a negative gearing, if you like, and then more of a tax benefit or a cash back to yourself. And then the home you live in, you sort of pay that debt down quicker, because that interest on that principal place of residence or the home isn't tax deductible. You get no tax deduction for it. Is that what you both entertain to make sure we can nail the home down first in terms of debt, keep the debts on the investment properties high, because they create more negative gearing, bigger tax return?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's just another 1%er that you're adding to the other 1%ers that we spoke about before. It's loan structuring is critical. One, to give you the best opportunity, but then to reap all of the benefits that we're talking about that are available to you.
And I think people don't understand with negative gearing how much you can actually claim from that investment property. So interest is one. Obviously, there's a whole range of other things. Can you rattle them off?
Yeah, everything. Everything is probably easier. So water rates, council rates,
all expenses, all holding costs,
all holding
purchasing costs.
Which, to use example again, let's say my rental income's 20 grand. My council rates, water rates, all that sort of stuff is like, I don't know, 5 grand, let's say, 5 grand. My interest on my loan, which is quite high because I want a bigger loan there, I want to be geared more, is $10,000. Then my depreciation is 10 grand, hypothetically. I'm at a negative 5 grand. Now, if I'm a high net wealth individual, I should say, high tax rate, 50 cents in the dollar, if that negative outlay, even though it's got depreciation in it, which is non-cash, is 5K, my tax rate's 50%, I'm getting 2.5 grand back as a refund. If I have 10 properties, that's 25 grand. Like, it starts to expand itself out. That's how negative gearing works.
And if you do have an appetite for investing, and maybe you're in the market or whatnot, I don't know if it's a strategy, and feel free to cut this out as well, by the way. This isn't accounting advice, but there is always an opportunity to move the deck chairs a little bit, so you can release as much equity as you can out of your principal place of residence. Draw out a loan and then move those funds onto your principal place of residence, pay down the debt there, as long as you don't clear it out, but it just sort of sits there in an offset account. That way, essentially, you're doing what you're saying, where you're minimising your non-tax deductible debt and you're maximising your tax deductible debt.
Well,
now,
what you're doing is you're just waiting for your property to come up, right? You're just holding that money there. That's what we're doing.
Instead of sitting it on an investment
Correct,
loan that you haven't drawn down, you can set it in your offset.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if this would suit Lisa. There might be a couple of extra Gucci bags.
I don't know if I can hold myself back.
You've got to be very disciplined around that strategy.
You got to know when to talk, mate. I'm just sitting here patiently. I'm sitting here.
Wait, what? I can release equity and go and buy Gucci bags?
Oh, look, I'm maxed out already. No.
I don't wear Gucci. I'll buy Gucci bags. I wear Ralph Lauren, mate. It's a lot cheaper. Okay, so we've gone over location. That's really the starting point. We've gone over the concept of leverage and being mindful of leverage. Something we didn't really touch on with leverage, I just want to make note of, is making sure that if you have a lot of available equity in your principal place of residence, which we just spoke about, or even in your investment properties, using that in lieu of cash. I didn't really stress that point, but using it to get ahead because it can expedite how fastly you move. We've spoken about negative gearing. We've spoken about making sure your loan structuring has a lot of debt on investment properties because you can claim that interest and other related costs, but lower on your principal place of residence because it's not tax deductible interest. What else? What else are some key elements?
Self-managed super funds. We have to go there. People don't understand this area, I think, and it's so important. And it can be just something that, like, they might not have the available equity, for instance. They may not have the salary or the serviceability for a personal investment, but people don't realise there's superannuation sitting there. And if they've got the right amount, they can create a self-managed super fund and then invest in property, and that's how they could get in the property market. And that's how I did it my first time. It was like, wow, that's amazing that I can do this. So go into that, just a crash course.
I think I'll start with just saying this is the easiest point to say, and I've said this a few times with you in meetings. Do the same kind of thing you would do in your own name in super. Like that's my personal viewpoint, right? And I know it's super simple, but like I'm licensed to do shares and I'm licensed to do all the other stuff. Ironically, I really push property and push what you do because I believe in it, and it's what served me personally, right? I think if you can use your super or you and your partner's super collectively to be able to buy property, I think it's smart to go, let's deploy the similar principle of what we would do personally. There are nuances in this and there are little points of difference. Such as with super, you're not really trying to level up all your loans and make your loans really big because your tax in super is so small, like 15% versus potentially 50% personally. So you're not really wanting to go aggressive on the tax game in terms of your finance structure in super, but you're able to do it in other ways, like contributing more money over into super from your personal name to pick up that point of difference from 50 cents in the dollar to 15% as a taxing point. So it's more the shifting of contributions, but super allows you to use debt, just like personal. It allows you to buy property. It allows you to manage your own super and not have to do too much in stock markets, etc. And the beauty of super as well is, you build up a nice little monopoly portfolio in super, get to 60, it's tax-free if you retire. So there's a lot of advantages of just playing this same concept. Location, not so much leverage, but it's still evident. Not so much depreciation, but it can be valuable, interest, etc. Doing the same thing. Like, that's my point.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You just need to understand that it's the property is the vehicle to get you to retirement and maximise your super contributions, right? And I would say the majority of people out there have no idea where their super's being invested. It's a compulsory savings plan implemented by the government. So why wouldn't you take some kind of ownership into where that money's going, right? And I agree, all of the exact same principles are done in terms of how you find the good properties and whatnot. But depending on your age and depending on your exit strategy, there may be some slightly different acquisitions in terms of properties that you're buying pending your circumstances, so we'll help clients that are very, very close to retirement, meaning that, cash flow and income is really important to them. So we will make sure that we get in a property that's suitable to that. There'll be other people that are quite young and, they're just looking for that long-term growth. And like Ryan said, they're not really bothered about income or anything. It's just more of like a set and forget play. So there's no one size fits all, just like buying in your personal name. And I think it was good that you mentioned that it's basically, all the same principles are done, but depending on your individual situation, like you mentioned, Lisa, you may not have usable funds in your personal circumstances, but your super could be really healthy. So it's like, what can we do? Can we do something here? And how do we do it if you do have that appetite to invest?
Yeah. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't feel when you're starting out, it doesn't feel as scary because I think property investment can be a bit of like a leap for a lot of people when they first start out. Whereas I feel like when you do it in your super, because it's not something that's coming out of your own account, it's money that's just going to sit there somewhere anyway. Property is a good game to invest in. Obviously, it's got proof that it grows and appreciates very well if you get the place right. So I think it's less scary to delve into that first and dabble in it and feel like, okay, now I understand this game. Now I'm going to do it in my personal name, for instance. And that's how it felt for me.
And not doing everything at one time, like you're allowed to be patient with this sort of stuff, but I think it's being consistent's the most important thing. Like you might buy one in your own name or buy one in super, and then you might revert to the other, and then you might get a bit of confidence and you do two simultaneously. It's just about maintaining activity, I think is important, but maintaining activity in what we're talking about, because these principles are so important. And I'm glad we've isolated a little bit location to benefits. I've never looked at it like that because that goes, okay, nail the location, 80% heavy lifting. I like that. And then get your other 20%, 80-20 rule. This is cool. It's actually turning into something to make sure that you're moving forward. And I just really want to stress this point. I've already done it a few times is whether you're buying your first home to live in, whether you're buying your first little investment, whether you're buying a development, whatever the context is, you need the support.
Absolutely.
Like you need that critical support, that those chess players that all know how to play chess in different sides of the board.
Absolutely. I mean, like I'm experienced in it now. I classify it semi-experienced. I would still not do it without the support of people like you guys on my team and
No chance.
a broker like Aaron. Never. I don't think I'll ever get to that point.
No, I think I agree 100%. Like for me, Sharpie, the last one you did, because I will never buy a location. I just never, even though I might think I know, I don't have any clue.
Yeah.
Like, let's be completely bluntly honest, right?
Yeah.
From a financial kind of advice and ROI and how to structure it and how to make sure it's tax effective and those elements, sure, I'm super confident every day of the week, have been for years. In terms of broking, know a lot about that, and so do you, Maddie and Lisa, but still making sure that that guy is running it is so important. So I think that's the key point here. That's bigger than location, really. It's your team and building your team fast enough.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't have access to everyone, just leverage on the people that you do have access to, right? Not everyone can necessarily afford a financial planner or an accountant or a mortgage broker, but ask some questions, do some of your due diligence, make sure that the one or the two individuals that you have access to have some experience across this. That way you're kind of maximising the best out of what you have access to, right? So that's also important. So if it's just an accountant or if it's just a mortgage broker or if it's just a financial planner or if it's just a buyer's agent, ask them, are you experienced in investing in property? Do you own properties yourself? How long have you been doing this for? These types of things.
Perfect. And that's so important because we know from working in this industry and having experienced it, there are a lot of people out there that actually still, financial planners, accountants, etc., that don't have experience in property investment. And there are a lot of buyers agents out there that, quite frankly, shouldn't be used.
Couldn't agree more.
So, it's really important to get recommendations. So obviously if it's not us, which it should be, but if it's not, it should be somebody that comes highly recommended, experienced, and they're a team that work together. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and do your own due diligence.
Absolutely.
Like you said.
Don't just go to Google.
Ask some good questions.
Yes.
Ask some really good questions.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks, guys. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well done.
Baby, tell me the